Hi, this is Joe Bowen, the voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs on Toronto radio station Talk 640. Thank you for supporting Frontier College by purchasing The Name of the Game is Reading book tape. Frontier College is a non-profit organization promoting literacy across Canada. All proceeds from the book tape will finance Frontier College's reading programs and homework clubs for needy children. Frontier College now has reading circles or homework clubs in 30 public housing buildings in the Toronto area, and they have set a goal to start reading programs in 300 buildings. The book tape is intended to encourage kids to read. Ideally, we would like to encourage all children to read for at least 10 minutes each day. The Toronto Maple Leafs would like to thank the many sponsors who have been instrumental in putting this project together, including McClellan and Stewart, Chapters, Sam the Record Man, EMI, and Talk 640. Without their strong sponsor support, this program would not have happened. Hey, we'd also like to thank the Maple Leaf players who've read passages on this tape: Kirk Muller, Nick Kypreos, Larry Murphy, Wendel Clark, Matt Sundin, and Jaime Macoun. Lastly, we would like to extend a very special thank you to author Roy MacGregor for allowing the use of his kid's book for this project. For those interested, Roy has a series involving the Screech Owls, which are available at all Chapters, Smith Books, and Coles bookstores. Now, let's get reading. The Screech Owls are headed into the depths of northern Quebec bush for the most unusual tournament of their young hockey lives. Thanks to the Owls' speedy little right winger, Jesse Highboy, the Screech Owls are the first non-native team ever to be invited to play in the First Nations Pee Wee hockey tournament. It is an extraordinary honor. Travis and the rest of the Owls have been working since Christmas to raise money for the trip. Some of them convinced they're off to the North Pole to play. Nish, however, isn't so sure he wants to leave the comfort of Burger King and the strip malls and his new Nintendo 64 for trap lines and wild meat and a hockey tournament he never even heard of before Jesse started talking about it. Now to continue the story, here's Maple Leaf winger Kirk Muller.
I'm going to hurl. 5 rolls away, Travis Lindsay could hear Nish moaning into a pillow. He could hear him over the tinny pound of the Walkman hanging loosely off Dada's bent ears as he dozed into the next seat. He could hear him over the clatter of the serving cart and the shouting coming from Derek and Dimitri as they played a game of hearts in the row behind. He could even hear Nish over the unbelievable roar of the engines. How could anyone sleep at a time like this? Travis wondered, glancing at Dada. This was the first time Travis had flown, and it hadn't been at all what he had imagined. This was no 10-minute helicopter lift at the fall fair, nor was it like the big, smooth passenger jet his father took once a month to business meetings in Montreal. This was 3 solid hours of howling engines, air pockets, and broken cloud. They were headed, it seemed, for the North Pole. They had all driven to Val-d'Or, Quebec, the day before, and from there it was 1,500 kilometers further north by air to their final destination, Waskakanish, a native village on the shore of James Bay. They were on a Dash 8, an aircraft that Dada, who knew everything about computers and National Hockey League statistics, but nothing whatsoever about life, claimed could take off and land in the palm of your hand. This was an exaggeration, of course, but Travis had felt it wasn't far off when the cramped 50-seat plane taxied out onto the runway, revved the engines hard once, and seemed to shoot straight off the ground into the low clouds. Travis had barely taken a second breath by the time the plane rose through the clouds and into the sunshine hidden beyond. It was as if the cabin of the plane was being painted with melted gold. Blinded by the sudden light, Dada lowered the window shade, but Travis had reached across and raised it again. He wanted to see everything. The pilot had come onto the intercom and warned them that the flight might be bumpy and that he'd be leaving the seatbelt sign on. The flight attendant would have to wait before bringing out the breakfast cart. The coaches and several parents, Travis included, were sitting towards the back of the plane. Dada's and Wilson's and Fod's parents were all there. Perhaps they wanted to make sure nothing went wrong this time the way it had in Toronto. The 3 boys hadn't missed a game or practice since Muck let them come back at the end of a month-long suspension over the unfortunate shoplifting incident at the Hockey Hall of Fame. They had apologized to the team and they'd missed a key tournament, and eventually Muck figured they'd learned their lesson. Travis knew they had. He talked to Dada on the telephone almost every night during his suspension, and he knew that several times Dada had been in tears. Jesse Highboy was sitting directly across from Travis. Beside him was his father and mother and his Aunt Teresa, the chief of Waskaganish. No one called her Teresa or even Mrs. Otter Eyes. They all called her Chief. She had come down to Val-d'Or to welcome the Screech Owls, and now she was bringing them all to northern Quebec for the First Nations Pee-wee hockey tournament, which would feature, for the first time, a non-native Pee-wee hockey team, the Screech Owls. Jesse's father had set it up. He had met with the team and parents and talked to them about the chance of a lifetime. The hockey would be a part of the trip, he had stressed, but the real reward would come in getting to experience the North and the native culture. All they had to do was get there. The people of Waskaganish were so pleased with the idea that they had offered to put everyone up, players and parents, free of charge. No wonder so many hands had gone up when Mr. Highboy asked for a show of interest. The Owls had held bottle drives and organized car washes, and the parents had worked so many bingos that Mr. Lindsay celebrated the end of them by burying his smoke-filled bingo clothes in a deep hole behind the garage. The team had read up on the North and were excited about what they had learned. The Northern Lights, caribou, trap lines, the midnight sun. It's spring, not summer, Willie Granger, the team trivia expert, had pointed out to those Owls, like Nish, who figured they'd never have to go to bed and could stay up all night long. Day and night are just about equal this time of year, same as where we live. But no one expected anything else to be the same. No one. Perhaps, Travis wondered, this was why Nish had been acting so oddly. In the weeks leading up to the trip, Nish had kidded Jesse, mercilessly. Should I bring a bow and arrow? Nish had asked. Will we be living in teepees? Some of it had been pretty funny, Travis had to admit, but it left him feeling a bit uneasy. Travis knew that the general rule of a hockey dressing room was anything goes, and certainly Jesse had handled Nish's cracks easily, laughing and shooting back insults. But Travis still found it intriguing that no one other than Nish took such shots. No one expected teepees, but beyond that, they didn't really know what to expect. Chief Otter Eyes and Air Quebec, the airline that set up the charter, had put on a special breakfast for the Owls. Once the turbulence had settled enough, the flight attendant handed out a breakfast the likes of which no Screech Owl, Jesse Highboy excepted, had ever seen. There were tiny things like tea biscuits that Chief Otter Eyes explained were bannock, just like we cook up on the trap line. And there was fish, but not cooked like anything Travis had ever seen at a fish and chip shop. This fish was dry and broke apart easily. At first, Travis wasn't too sure, but when he tasted it, he thought it was more like candy than fish. Smoked whitefish, Chief Otter Eyes said, smoked and cured with sugar. I got no knife and fork, Nish had shouted from his seat. Chief Otter Eyes laughed. You've got hands, haven't you? Yeah? Clamp 'em over your mouth then, Wilson had called from the other side of the plane. This is traditional Cree food, Chief Otter Eyes had leaned forward and told Nish. I'll take a traditional Egg McMuffin, thank you, Nish called back. He wouldn't try the food. Instead, he dug down into the carry-on bag he had stuffed beneath his seat and hauled out 3 chocolate bars and sat stuffing his face with one hand while he used the other to hold his nose, as though he couldn't stand the smell of the smoked fish. They had just been finishing up this unusual breakfast when the plane rattled as if it had just hit a pothole. The fasten your seatbelt light flashed and the pilot had come on the intercom to tell the attendant to stop picking up the trays and hang on. They were about to enter some more choppy air. I'm going to hurl!
The Screech Owls land in Waskaganish, a beautiful Cree village on the shores of James Bay, and they are met by one of the Pee-wee teams they'll be playing, the Waskaganish Wolverines. Nish takes an instant dislike to the players. Travis, meanwhile, takes an instant liking to them, particularly to the Wolverines captain, Jimmy Whiskey Jack, and Jesse's cousin, who is one of the other players. Jesse's cousin is Rachel Highboy, and when she smiled and shook hands with Travis, he felt like he was still on the bouncing plane with the bottom falling out of it. The Screech Owls are treated like visiting royalty for the tournament. The Wolverines hold a banquet in their honor, but Nish refuses to try the food. His reluctance to have anything to do with northern culture and the ways of the bush give Jesse and Rachel Highboy good reason to hatch a plan. They arrange for several of them to head off by snowmobile to visit the Highboy grandparents at an isolated goose camp. Nish can't resist the chance to drive a snowmobile, the opportunity to show off. To continue the story, here's Maple Leaf forward Nick Kypreos.
They got away by noon. Plenty of time, Mr. Highboy told them, to get there in good light and get settled in. Travis's and Liz's parents came down and took photographs of the expedition setting out. Travis's mother seemed worried, and he suddenly felt a little uneasy. But it was silly to fret, he told himself. They had 3 machines, so it would hardly matter if one broke down. They were dressed warmly and had big mittens and padded helmets. Jesse's father was a fanatic about taking all the right precautions, and there was going to be no fooling around. Muck was there too, and he took the 3 of them aside for a moment. "You stick together," he said to Nish and Travis and Liz. "And you do what Jesse and Rachel tell you. Understand?" Nish clearly did not. He was, after all, an assistant captain, and Jesse was a third liner. But having already fallen out once with Muck, he wasn't about to make a second mistake. Nish nodded. Travis got to drive right away, with Nish as his passenger. They followed Jesse and Liz, who took the lead. Rachel brought up the rear with a single snow machine. They left the shoreline and headed into the woods, where the trail began to bounce and roll with a rhythm that reminded Travis of riding a horse. It was never like this in a car. He could feel everything, and he loved it. A light squeeze of the accelerator, and the big machine responded instantly. They rolled over the countryside for a better part of an hour. They passed over frozen lakes and swamps, and through short, dark stands of black spruce, and every once in a while they would catch a glimpse of the bay itself, the dark, menacing water far out from the shoreline. They stopped to share a couple of oranges, and Nish complained to Jesse that he wasn't getting a chance to drive. Jesse immediately offered him the single machine, moving Rachel up to ride with Travis. "Do you want to drive?" Travis asked when she moved over. "You drive," Rachel said. "I can do it any time. You're only here until Sunday." She smiled at him so nicely that when she sat down behind him, Travis had trouble catching his breath. And when they moved on again, she placed her mittened hands on his hips to steady herself. He wondered if his heart would stop. There was no use talking. With the helmets and the roar of the engine, they wouldn't hear each other. And anyway, that was just as well. Travis didn't have a clue what to talk about. Much music? Whether Rachel owned a compact disc player? What did they talk about in the north? They moved down a gentle slope and back to the shoreline of the Big Bay. The ice thick and covered with hard-packed snow. The trail perfect. In front, Jesse opened his machine up a bit and pulled ahead. Travis squeezed the accelerator and felt Rachel gripping a little tighter. He felt wonderful. He had never in his entire life enjoyed anything as much as this. Travis saw Nish before he heard him. His helmet blocked the sound, and the engine of the 3 machines were all screaming together as Nish left the trail and flew past them with a wave of his hand. Travis couldn't believe how fast Nish was going. Nish turned the machine so it jumped across the trail in front of Jesse and then continued on the other side, leaving them far behind. "He doesn't even know where he's going," Travis shouted. It was useless. Nish let up on the accelerator until he had fallen back with them. Maybe he scared himself, thought Travis. But a moment later, he was off on the trail and flying away again, far out under the frozen surface of the bay, the black, open water in the distance beyond him. Travis couldn't help himself. "Don't go out there!" He felt Rachel's grip tighten. Perhaps she was yelling too. But they couldn't even hear each other, so how would Nish ever hear them? Jesse turned his machine off the trail and started out onto the bay, where Nish was in the middle of a long loop. Then Jesse came to a stop, jumped off, and began waving frantically to Nish. Travis stopped his machine. The 4 of them, Jesse, Liz, Travis, and Rachel, all began waving at Nish. Travis thought that Nish must have been trying to turn back, but he wasn't leaning out the way Isaac had taught them, and the machine wasn't responding. Nish smashed into a drift and for a moment was airborne, the snowmobile almost turning sideways before he righted it and bounced into a landing that almost threw him off. Travis didn't need to be there to know that Nish had just scared himself half to death. And then Nish vanished.
To continue the story, here's defenseman Larry Murphy.
No! Travis was aware of the scream before he realized that it was him doing the screaming. He instinctively yanked his helmet free and started running, only to find he was going nowhere. Someone had hold of him. "You'll go through too," Rachel was shouting at him. It was all too much for Travis, the screaming, the cold wind whipping in off the bay into his face, and a great dark hole where a moment before had been his best friend. Travis panicked. He started to cry. He could feel tears burning. He looked at Liz. She was screaming. Something bobbed in the water, something surfacing, a head, an arm flailing. It was Nish. Travis tried to move forward again, but Rachel was still holding him tight. He tried to shake her off, but Jesse grabbed him too. "Cool it, okay?" Jesse shouted. "We panic, we're all going down with him. We do this right, okay? We do it right." Travis had never heard Jesse like this. He was so sure of himself. He stopped struggling. Nish's helmet must have come off when the machine broke through the ice, because his head was bare, and he was swimming, or at least trying to swim. With his heavy jacket and mitts, he could hardly move, but he managed to reach the unbroken ice and clung on. "Help me!" he screamed. Travis could feel his tears hardening on his cheek. They were freezing. It was that cold, and the wind was stronger now. "Spread out," Jesse ordered. "Spread out and walk slowly towards him. If we go in a single line, we'll break through." Jesse got them into position, and they began walking in a wedge, Jesse in the lead, towards Nish, who was desperately hanging on. "Pull me out! Pull me out!" Rachel broke away and ran back. Travis couldn't look at her. She must have been afraid. He couldn't blame her. So was he. But before they were halfway to where Nish was still scrambling, she was back. She was carrying hockey sticks and skates. What the heck's with her? Travis wondered. Nish is drowning and she wants to play hockey? Good idea, Rach, Jesse said. Travis couldn't believe the calm in Jesse's voice. What good idea? Help me! Nish called again. They were close enough to see his face when Jesse held up his hand for them all to stop. Travis could see the terror in Nish's eyes. He knew just from looking that Nish believed he was going to die, drowned before their eyes while they stood there watching helplessly. There was desperation and anger in Nish's voice. Help me! Nish tried to scramble onto the ice, but it shattered in front of him, plunging him down in a splash of ice water. He bobbed back up, his hair plastered to his head. Please help me, Travis. Hang on, Nish, Jesse called. We're going to get you out of there. Just hold on and don't try to pull yourself up. You're breaking the ice. Help me! I'm going to die! Signaling them to stay back, Jesse tested the ice by stepping ahead gently, then pressing down, waiting, and bringing the other foot forward and setting it down in the same careful way, far to one side. He was slowly working his way as close to the hole as he dared get. Travis looked around, desperate for something to do to help. Rachel was sitting on the ice with the hockey sticks placed together. She was unlacing one of the skates as quickly as possible. She looked up, her face calm but determined. Do the other ones, she commanded. Huh? The other skates. We need the laces. Travis and Liz began furiously unlacing the other skates. By the time they handed the laces to Rachel, she had already tied 2 hockey sticks together. She took Travis's lace and began tying another knot higher up for added support. Liz jumped over and began doing the same thing with her lace. Liz knew what to do. Travis could only stare uselessly. Nish screamed the most terrible, pitiful scream. It was blood-curdling. Travis shivered. He was still crying. He could feel his cheeks burning. He couldn't even see straight. His best friend was drowning, and he couldn't do anything about it. Hold on to my legs, Jesse shouted to Travis. What? Hold on to my legs, he repeated. He sounded angry. Jesse lay down on his stomach and wiggled forward towards Nish. He looked back impatiently. Travis grabbed Jesse's legs, and when Jesse wiggled ahead again, Travis moved with him. Nish was still trying to pull himself up. He was breaking through and falling back. Stay still, Jesse ordered Nish. You might break right through to us. There was so much command in his voice that finally Nish stopped struggling. Jesse looked back at Rachel, who was ready. She handed the sticks forward to him. Jesse swung them carefully out in front. He was at least 1 hockey stick short of Nish. We're going to have to get closer. Travis didn't know if they could. He was afraid of breaking through. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed to be shaking his whole body. He could imagine his parents finding out that they'd all vanished on the bay with nothing remaining but 2 snowmobiles and a big black hole. They wouldn't even know how it had happened, that Nish had been such a dummy. He felt someone grab his own legs. He looked back. It was Rachel, and behind her, Liz was down with her arms around Rachel's legs. Go on, Rachel shouted ahead to Jesse. We can hold you. Jesse wiggled forward. Travis wriggled. The girls wriggled. They moved ahead like a slow snake, the blade of the farthest stick coming ever closer to Nish. Grab it and hold, Jesse shouted to Nish. Don't pull. We'll do all the pulling. You just hold on and try to slide out, okay? Nish was no longer screaming. He was scared. He was placing all his hope in Jesse. Okay, Nish said. He was crying openly. Travis couldn't blame him. He was crying too. Jesse wiggled ahead one more time. Nish reached out with one mitt and took hold of the blade. He had a good grip. Let go of the ice, Jesse called. I can't, Nish shouted. There was pure terror in his voice. You have to. I'm afraid to let go. Suddenly, from behind Travis, Rachel shouted, Let go, Nish. You'll be all right. There was a brief pause, and then Nish let go of the ice and took the blade with both hands. Hang on, Jesse shouted. Then to Travis and the others, Slowly now. Pull back slowly. They began to inch backwards. Nish pushed at the ice. It cracked loudly and gave under him, sending him back down. Just ride right over the ice, Jesse yelled. Don't do a thing but hang on and slide. They pulled again, and Nish came out part way. The ice gave a mighty crack, and Travis closed his eyes. But nothing happened. It was holding. They pulled again. Nish came up a bit more. His upper body was out and resting on the ice. His face was twisted into a scream, but no sound was coming out. One more, Jesse called. One more, and he's out. Travis felt a tremendous yank on his legs. He couldn't believe the strength of the two girls behind him. He pulled as hard as he could. He could feel Jesse pulling. He's out! Jesse turned over on his back, gasping for air. Nish was fully out of the water and on the ice. He was wiggling towards them, still holding the stick. They worked Nish back. As soon as he was able, Jesse reached out, grabbed Nish's hand, and pulled him quickly to them. Spread out again, Jesse ordered. We don't want to break through. Travis moved away quickly. Nish tried to get to his feet. He was gasping, choking, and shaking violently. Jesse stayed with him, got him standing, and slowly they all began retreating from the hole. Nish was bawling. He couldn't stop. He was sobbing and blubbering and couldn't seem to get his breath. But he was alive. Though how long could he last before he froze to death? Travis wondered.